dude, I feel like everybody's right and everybody's wrong.
100%. Why is this important? Why are we even going here? He's helped a lot of guys. He's also not had success with a lot of guys.
Come in with a purpose, and they're very intentional with what they do and how they do it.
From the majors to the sandlot, baseball and softball share space in one place. Welcome to the farm system.
Fellas, and the ladies, welcome back to another episode of The Farm. We're sitting down with my boy Kodee Martin.
Sir, yes, sir.
He got that dog in him.
That
He got he got that dog in him.
Dollar
boy.
50.
I know, what a classic. So we got some things. We talking baseball today. You know what I'm saying? We getting into that hitting today. We talking about hitting today. So what do you got for us, Code? What are we talking about? What are we unpacking?
Yeah, so I think a couple topics that have been like off the top of my mind is one, just seasonally. Two, season's around the corner, right?
Yeah.
So just like a super timely one, I
For
think.
pros and for
You got
all
pros getting ready to start spring training. Colleges, I know, this weekend is a lot of colleges' first weekend.
Yeah.
This will be shot and, put out a little bit later. But,
Yep.
relatively recent. And then high schools are starting to ramp up here locally. I know, some of the northern states got a little bit of time. But still, good to get this information out to them.
For sure.
Before they get there. And then also, too, with that is like it also brings a sense of urgency that a lot of athletes did not have this whole off season.
Yeah.
And so we start seeing here in-house as, people starting to come in, season a month away, and then they're like, I want to do this. It's like, well, there was 3 months of an off season.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah,
talk about that process and, like, what does that look like from a private training perspective of like, hey, your season starts in a month, or, hey, they did come in 4 or 5 months ago and it was more of a longer process, and what that looks like. And so, and how that can affect the athlete or the hitter's, process in general too, and how they look at the start of the season. And so those are a couple of really big topics that have been on my mind recently, just here, last couple of weeks. And so really the first thing that I would like to kind of dive into is that second one I brought up, because I think it kind of goes hand in hand, like you mentioned, is, when it comes to training hitters, I think something that I've learned in the private space the last couple years is the context in which the athlete's coming to you for. What I mean by that is, hey, spring training's in a month, and now you're looking for an overhaul, or hey, my season's in 2 weeks. Now you're looking for the overhaul. If there is to be an overhaul, probably should have been started a while ago. Mm-hmm. But, for me, the awareness of being like, hey, if this is if season's right around the corner, I can't take you apart. Right. There's just too much that could go wrong. Like your timing, your vision's going to change. Then too, you don't have a routine built up and a process in place that when things do go wrong, you can get yourself back to center. Like there's just a lot that goes into that. And so understanding the context of like, how often are you doing the work? How often do I get to be with you? And what that looks like. And so I know too, I have a little bit different experience with you in-house, but I think too, that experience yourself where like you can give that information out to people in a sense of like, what does that process look like for you personally when it comes to hitters coming to you based on what time of the year and like when you decide, okay, it's okay for me to do a little bit deeper dive, some taking apart to put back together, an overhaul, or do I kind of work with like the analogy I'm sure a lot of people have heard you say is like, how do I drive the car that I have today better, right? And just bring awareness to that, or can I take some parts out of the car and actually replace them and fix them and zoop them up, and so kind of like that process, what that looks like for you. We'll just preface, that's going to be a long answer, so everybody get ready, because I know you got some information to go in with that. So
Yeah, so a lot of different things to take into consideration of context that we need to know when we're just coaching. And like, again, if I don't have time to take Humpty Dumpty apart and put them back together again, it's like, again, for example, you got a race on Saturday and that the job, and like, let's say it's Thursday, right? It's Thursday, race is on Saturday, you get NASCAR and you're like, man, this is like a, a 6-day rebuild, right? Or I got to wait for these parts to come in, or, all these things are going to take time to develop. Again, obviously with the body, we can't just like, obviously you can have some surgeries where you're replacing a ligament or something like that, right? Something wild. But when we're talking about specifically, like the human body, if we know that something's going to take time to develop, and that's why it's so important to know how long something might take to develop, not only just being able to put it into the cage swing, right, but we want it to show up, obviously, when they are actually playing and being on the field. So because of that, we got to be very mindful of how long it takes to get a skill autonomous, which is going to be, obviously, again, you've done this your whole life, and all of a sudden you want to go out, like you said, in a month from now and move completely different than you moved your entire life, is more than likely that's not going to happen. And so we're very mindful of that as when we're coaching with guys, is like we don't do a full rebuild with everybody. And also too, like we even do that when, like you talked about, even more like seasonally, right? Like someone might be in the middle of the season. It's like, we're probably not doing a major overhaul. And with that being said, obviously people can go to the extent of being like, oh, it's season, we're just going to drive the car we have for the whole season, and like we're not going to make any adjustments to the car the whole year. It's like, no, of course we're going to make adjustments to it as well. Like there needs to be adjustments. Your body is going to change throughout the year. What worked for you at the beginning might not work for you middle or towards the end. Or, again, you are traveling, you are eating different, you are sleeping different, you do need different recovery, you have different classes at different times of the year, right? You do have finals, you do have these other things that are going to come into the mix, definitely during playoff times and things like that as well. You are going to get beat up a little bit more because you are playing at 100% and the games do matter. And like, again, like everything's full go, right? So, and then injuries happen throughout the year, right? Like we were just talking about this the other day with like one of our players. It's like, their foot gets stepped on, and like all of a sudden now they're doing with that, and oh man, they got some right knee pain, or it's their back or something like that they hurt when they ran into a collision with like one of their outfielders or something, right? Like things like that happen a lot, and so keeping that in mind, and like us being mindful of like where we are in the year in the context of where the player is, and also too like the mentality of the player, right? Or like just like how secure they are in making changes. Are we changing them back towards something they used to do, like maybe it was a toe tap or something, or they used to do previously, or are we doing something that they've never done in their entire life, right? And just because they've never done it in their life doesn't mean they won't catch on to it quick. Like it might be something that's amazing for them, right? So we're keeping all that in context, and then also too before we apply anything. Like, we can do training with it first, right? We can do it in training and kind of use it like a drill. And then like, okay, if this really works, then we might bring it into game. And like sometimes we might not. But I think that, just in general from the get-go is like some of that context is really important. And then also too, again, Code, like you're having a lot of younger athletes here as well when like they're going in, like, again, like when I talk about that, like maturity with like understanding like how they move, or what's going on, with like their mentality at that age group too is also a lot different. Like high school is a different realm compared to some other levels. So again, also maybe something for you to touch on there, just like developing the mind of a more novice hitter.
Yeah. I think too. So kind of my thought and where my head was at is like, again, like I mentioned, I'm a different position where like I could just walk across the hallway and just ask you if I have a question. And so, but I think this is a really common thing that people struggle with, whether they know it or not, is they see what they see and they want to fix what they want to fix. But also too, there's sometimes that I've had to learn, like, I see that this is a problem, but the bigger problem is you play tomorrow. And I know now that for us to actually fix what I truly want to fix, I can't do that by tomorrow, right?
Yep.
And so I just think that's an interesting topic. And then like you and Steve did that video on like sometimes it's a physical makeup thing, right? Like the structure. Right? Just
hardware
actually doesn't allow you to do visually what you're trying to get to happen, right? But there's still, forces at play. But, like when it comes to that, I think something that's, to keep it like a little bit lower level, not to get like super into all the different sciences, which this still does, but in a more general public way, is like a lot of these high school guys that I've been working with and girls is honestly just having the real talk with them of like, hey, do you really think, and a lot of them pitch too, or have experience pitching. And I was like, how many times in a game do you miss your spot? And they're like, a lot, all the time. I'm like, okay, so like, is the pitcher really painting all the time and beating you? Or like, what's the deal here? Like you're giving too much credit to the pitcher. And like one of the big talks I've had with a lot of the high school guys is like, you're moving good enough to hit at the level you're playing at. Like, are you moving good enough to hit Verlander right now? Like, no. It's like for sure not. But like, like you're going to go see 80 to 85 and like you're moving more than good enough to go hit that. Like sometimes too, especially with the how much information there is now, I think everybody's seeking this next big unlock. And it's like, you don't need an unlock to hit at the level you're at. You're actually moving good enough to hit at the level you're at. There's more, like you're missing a whole aspect, which is what's my game plan? What am I hunting? What am I expecting? Right? Like we were talking about, like the car, like, okay, maybe my car just doesn't do that. So stop trying to do that.
Yeah.
Like I'm not
like this isn't a Ferrari.
Yeah. And that's okay.
This is a Toyota Corolla. The Toyota Corolla is still capable of driving down the street.
100%.
Is it capable of, is it capable of running a NASCAR race? Like, no, but I'm also not competing against other NASCARs.
Yeah.
And also too, there's a lot of other people that are driving a Toyota around here, and they're getting the work. They're doing other things. Like, it's not capable of doing everything, but at the same time, it's definitely capable of doing more than, like, I always tell the hitters all the time. It's like, if I can take my brain, put it in your body, I can hit at your level.
Yeah.
Like, the problem is like, again, it's not that, like, with your swing and how you're moving, right? It's like, again, just like having the other part of like being a hitter and knowing like what you need to do and like what you can do and angles you can create to get jobs done. And also too, again, just because you can't hit a ball 450 doesn't mean you can't hit a single.
Yeah.
Like they're different. They're completely different skills, and not completely different skills, but like, again, like I don't need a NASCAR to do, like, again, you don't need to be an elite athlete to hit a single off high school pitching. You just don't.
No, 100%. And like this always would stick with me is like, there's a point in time where I'm sure a lot of specifically like high school to college age males have probably gotten stronger than their dads or, people that are older than them, like male figures in their life.
Some dads like, no, hell no, not
right.
me, dog.
But what I would argue
Shout out
is
to
like
Steve.
a lot of those dads could probably still beat them in a fight because of the wisdom of their strength and their awareness of how to use some of that strength to a certain extent, right?
Yeah.
And so like, and I was using that.
I know how to leverage
like,
bodies.
Yeah, I was using that as like an example with hitting. Like, I haven't really been hitting. I'm weaker than I was when I played, right? I'm weaker than some of these like high school guys that come in here built like grown men, like these guys are 215 at 16. It's crazy. But it's like, but I can hit the ball harder than you right now because I know how to use my body differently. Like you were saying, my brain in your body, I could hit, right?
Yeah.
And so like touching on some of that too is like just a sense of confidence and like belief in themselves. Cause I also think too, now it's so easy to look around and compare yourself with social media and like this guy's committed here and this girl's committed there. And like, I got to commit by the time I'm 16. It's like, when do you ever tell yourself that you are good? When do you ever tell yourself like you are capable? It's like, there's just so much. I'm not.
Wait, why are you gonna call me out like that?
I live that life too. So it is what it is. But, and then there's like some realism to it. Like I'm not that good, but neither are you. It's like what I used to say about like, I played at the D2 level. I was like, I know I'm not that good, but neither is that guy. So,
100%.
Just
understanding. Yeah, no, that's also a good thing to always keep in mind too, is like, sometimes like I'll start going through like some of the things that hold us back from like producing at a higher level. But then I always remind the hitters like, but your competitor is also having to deal with that too. Like your competitor also is like having to deal with traveling. Your competitor is also having to deal with like, they go to school too. Right. Like, and don't get me wrong, like they might even have advantages in certain ways and you have advantages in certain ways. But at the end of the day, like one of the things I think is like just super, being mindful, like on that same side, is having an understanding that again, we're competing and there's never some perfect conditions. Like the most perfect condition should be your off season, right? You should be sleeping in your own bed. You should be with your family, right? Like think about it, even when you're in college, right? Like again, you're home. Like again, if you're not playing summer ball, and if you are playing summer ball, it's still pretty chill, right? Like again, like You ain't, a lot of you guys aren't going to school, doing your thing. Like it's more ideal situations, right? And I remember for me, like during the off season, because I needed to develop a lot more. Me playing in more games wasn't necessarily going to help me very much. So like I needed to go train in the off season. That's what I did every year, and I did. I progressively got way better than I was when I first went to college. And so a lot of people think like, oh, I'm going to go play all these games. Like, no. I mean, I kind of did like a hybrid. Like I came back home. There was like a little scout team that used to play. A lot of times too. We wouldn't be playing. We wouldn't be playing a ton of games. It might be like 18 maybe games, and a lot of them were double headers. So you're like 9 individual like weekends that we would play or whatever. And like if you think about that over, that's basically you go over a summer, like a little over 2 months, like that we would play, and then we'd have some cage time and other stuff. Okay, that would be my games, but majority of it was me just training, right? And I'd be lifting and doing other stuff and all my sprints and doing all my all my speed work and all those other things, and then also too on top of that, like hitting every day and hitting with pro guys and trying to get my swing better and developing from that other side, and reading and mentality stuff and just maturing and like all that stuff. I didn't have a farm when I was growing up, in the sense of like I had an academy that I hit at, but a lot of times it was just like the cage by myself, and I was just getting my own work in.
Right.
Comparatively to like obviously there's some different opportunities now that you can do during an off season, and so I do think, again, kind of tying us back and getting us back towards like this time of year is just understand when you're going into it, like it's not ideal. This is when like, yes, this is like the competitor comes out. And this is when there's going to be a time of not ideal situations, and you're not going to get all the time, the extra time for you to swing and like get to go back to your hitting coach and again, like you're going to have homework, you're going to have classes, you're going to have travel schedules, you're going to sit the bench. You're going to get benched. You're going to, things are going to happen, right? You're going to go over. Like you're going to mentally, you're going to have to start dealing with, some setbacks and some other things, right? Where it's like, again, during the fall, like everybody's playing, you guys are competing against each other. Even the starters and the backups are all playing. It's like, again, you're going to start getting into that time where coach sets the lineup and you get some opportunities and all, again, you might be the guy. Everybody likes to talk about the other thing. It's like, oh, I didn't start there in the year, and I'm going to battle my way into my way in the lineup. And like, I had that storyline too. But also too, there's a lot of people on the opposite side. Remember, the only reason I got an opportunity is because somebody else struggled. Somebody else struggled, started the year as the starter, and a couple weeks in were not the starter, right? And then all of a sudden I had that role, or, again, other people slid into our lineup. I remember as well, right? And like, that's part of it. And you got to also deal with that of being like, okay, what do I do and prepare for? There's a chance where, again, like maybe, maybe I am battling, I'm in that 7 spot, and there is another second baseman that's, as good as me and kind of hits like I do. And I'm just like the upperclassman. So they're trying to get me some reps. But, again, like, and I think that's why you got to detach yourself from a lot of the results side and like really have that perspective of just being like, yo, like, I'm going to work no matter what. Like, it don't matter if I'm starting or I'm not playing, or if I'm getting benched or I'm doing whatever. Like, my process is my process. Like, I'm working to get better all the time anyways. It doesn't really matter. If anything, if you're benched, you just have a lot less tax on your body. So it gives you, again, a little bit more, gives you a little bit more freedom. It gives you a little bit more freedom where you can tap into a little bit more training time, right? And also your body's not, I didn't play a double header today, bro. Like, I'm ready to rock. I sat there like a cheerleader and just, like clapped you up, you know what I'm saying? And so, and again, obviously just different wear and tear on the body, right? So most I did was like BP today or something, like, okay, cool. That should be an advantage. You should use that as an advantage, right? If you're not starting in the beginning, or if you end up getting benched, right? Like, okay, use what you got, right? Like, it's obviously not an ideal situation. It's not ideal not to start, and it's also not ideal not to get pulled out of the lineup, and it's also not ideal to be playing in all these games and you can't get your normal work in because you're traveling and you just played, again, you just played 2 full games and your body's tired. You need to recover, right?
Yeah.
So, and again, so I'm not getting my lift in like I could, if I wasn't playing or whatever, right? Like, all of those are not ideal situations, but at the end of the day, it's what we're all being called and we're competing against each other to do.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that's perspective, right? And like when you touched on like some of those, the younger hitters, right? Like the high school age group in specific, right? Is more what I'm talking about. Is my boy Tank is uncomfortable because there's too much food around.
He's on the move.
Those high school hitters in specific is, I always think like perspective wise, like if I had to look back at my career, is there were times at the beginning of the season that I know this sounds crazy, but like I hoped coach didn't put me in the lineup because I was that bad and I was struggling. Bro, I really don't want to dig myself in.
Like if you just bench me for a little bit, like give me at least the series or something.
Yes, right. And like that was one of the biggest unlocks for me was when they did bench me for like 4 games and was like, we're gonna give you a break mentally to get back locked in. You're gonna play next weekend. And I was like,
some players. Oof.
I was like, but and then there was some that where I started the season upset because I wasn't starting, right? And it's like, so it's all perspective, right? I think. And so looking at it from that way is like, okay, so you're not starting to start the year. Okay, so what? Like you did put in all that work, right? And there's going to be an opportunity at some point in time. And it's like, that's your opportunity to show all the work, right? And then on the flip side, like you did start the year. So instead of putting your pressure on yourself to then I have to get results because I put in all this work, which too, it's just not the case. Hard work doesn't make results. Hard work is a prereq, but and too, like truth is at certain levels, like there's some people that just don't work that hard that are still just like
more
gifted,
talented
right?
than you are.
Gifted, right?
Yeah, they're gifted.
And so they succeed. But too, like just because you're starting to start the year, that doesn't mean you need to put pressure on yourself to have to go get results either. Like this was the run up the mountain. Now it's okay, I get to go let it eat a little bit. I get to go do the fun part, right? This is where I get a sprint, right? I've been doing all the hard stuff when nobody else is watching. Like this is the fun time.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think too, just perspective wise, I think that's everybody in all different situations can find a way to say like this isn't ideal.
Yeah.
In every single situation.
Yeah, whine and complain, sit in the back of the dugout and complain that I'm not playing, or even too, like along with it, like not only just sit in the back of the dugout, because my Adrian Dinkle, again, when Dinkle was coaching me, he used to bring that up. He'd be like, hey, this is the time of the year when guys like to huddle in the back of the dugout and start talking smack. And then also too, look, I'm telling you, like, how everybody says like they want to act like they always had good intentions? Yo, I absolutely did not have good intentions. There was plenty of times where I was sitting on the bench, right, where it's like sitting there like, bro, like I want to be playing right now, right? Like especially when I was really young, I had a really hard time being a team guy, right? Especially, I would say specifically my freshman year. My freshman year, went to a JUCO, right? I showed up and I'm like, I'm gonna be the shortstop. Like I'm the man. Like again, the same thing. I went from high school. Like since I was a sophomore, I started on varsity every single game. Like, again, like hadn't not played for a really long time. When I talked to the coach, it's like, where am I going to play? Or, am I going to be a starting first? Like just all this young freshman stuff, like, and the same thing, like I got there in the same, I wasn't playing well, but also was too insecure to like be okay with just where I actually really was. And yeah, somebody else played and like I didn't start for like my first like 15, maybe 10 or 12 games, something like that, maybe. Somebody can fact check me, look at my stats. You guys love to do that. So in any case, yeah, I didn't play. And then, I battled, because one of the things I also did, this is also a little trick for you too, if you're not in the lineup, watch what the team, like fill a void, right? Like figure out what the team is having a hard time doing. Like, is it situationally? Like, is it, what are they having a hard time doing? And then also to try to do that, right? Is it just quality at bats, right? Like maybe, again, there's gonna be a big time situation. Like sometimes you're gonna get a pinch hit at bat, right? Late in the game, whatever. I did that even like my junior year is my first time getting a chance to get in the lineup was late game, right? Like the guy on the mound was throwing a no-hitter. Like, the guy on the mound's throwing a no-hitter. Umpire's zone is gigantic, right? That's why he's like a lefty that's been throwing off the plate all day, and the umpire's just giving it to him. So it's like, I already know that going up there, right? This guy's like in love with his changeup. But again, like, how does all that happen? Like that junior, I'm paying attention, right? Like I'm doing charts. Right. Like I know what this guy likes to throw. I know what the umpire's been doing. I've been listening to what all the hitters have been saying, right? Like, man, bro, he's calling 5 inches off the plate, and this guy's throwing a 2-seamer that's just running back over there. And he's just hitting it, and good for him. He's just hitting it over and over again. And again, we were ranked one of the top, I think we were top 20 at the time. And again, like this school is not even ranked, and like this guy's throwing a no hitter against us, right? And it's like that's when we discovered our team struggled with changeups. But also too, again, along with that is just like, mindful for my freshman year, how I got in the lineup, and I've said this a couple times, right? Is like we just couldn't score a run, guy on third base, less than 2 outs. Infield, back, in, everything. We just couldn't score runs in those situations. We just had really bad at bats. And so, at the time, especially being a freshman in junior college, like, and also too, not a massive, like a small junior college, right, is that we didn't have a whole bunch of guys that were thumping balls, right? So, a deep sack fly was a kind of a difficult task for us, especially all being freshmen, we're all light and ass, all the things, right? Like, is that, for us, like, I used to think about that too. It's just like, hey, I can't, if you did a percentage, if you look at like sack flies, like I can only on normal, like if I took you at 10 at bats, right? No matter who's on the mound or whatever, how often are you actually able to hit a sack fly, right? It's like, okay, that percentage to me at the time was much lower than my ability to hit a ground ball to second base. Like I can hit a ground ball to second base with, again, like I can manipulate the barrel, I can get the barrel there. Like that was something I can do really easily. And so like, not only with that, I was already pretty good at it, but then I started training it when I was in batting practice every day. When we did those rounds, I locked in, like I never missed those, right? And so when that situation came up in the lineup and nobody did it, like 2 games in, two games into the series, like I said, it was like 10 total, 12 total, whatever, into the season, that this kept reoccurring and we weren't scoring runs, right? That when we're in these games that we were losing. So again, coach finally put me in the lineup. Guess what? First pitch, guy throws me middle way fastball. I hit a ground ball to second base. Boom, we scored a run. The whole dugout went nuts, right? Because they've been knowing we've been struggling with this for about a month in, at least over a month in. That we were struggling scoring these runs, right? So that was just a big thing as well. Is like look into it and just understand. Like first off, again, it's not about you. And you should want the best players on the field. And I know in your head, you're like, yeah, I'm the best player though. But that's the thing. Like, again, I think of that old story too. You got to think of it like this too. I'm thinking of, what's his name? Who's the basketball coach? Maxwell talks about him all the time, but like basketball coach, that won, like college, like he's the absolute like legend. He's had
John Wooden.
Yes. So Wooden.
Coach K.
So yeah, Coach K is also the GOAT.
Yeah, he's pretty good.
But Wooden used to tell him. He said he told the story about like he had this freshman that came in who was like super gifted, really talented. Again, probably the best player on the team. The thing is though, is in the lineup, Wooden didn't have him in the lineup. And in basketball, obviously, there's only a few starting spots, all the things, right?
Yeah.
So he's in the dugout. He's on the bench, and he's like in mid game is like they're losing and all these other things, and he looks at Wooden, Coach Wooden. He says, I'm the best player on this team. Like, why am I on the bench right now when we're losing? Like, blah blah blah. And like he's got his little pride. He's juiced up all the stuff. And then Coach Wooden looks back at him and says, you may well be the best player on the team, but the team doesn't play its best when you're in the game. Right. And so the difference there of having a team dynamic of being like, hey, you know what? You might be better than that senior when it comes to just pure skill. But the team plays better with he's the captain of the team, right? And also too, like he also brings other things to the table. Then yeah, you have all these raw skills and all these other things, but like again, he also grinds out at bats. Like he also too is a great catalyst at the top of the lineup or whatever. Maybe he's the leadoff, maybe he's the number 2 hitter, right? And he just finds ways to get on base, right? Maybe it's not getting hits, maybe it's there's other ways that he finds and what he adds to the team dynamically. And also too, you might believe you're looking at particular skills thinking that these are the things that matter the most when the coach is like, yo, the biggest thing, like for example, sometimes we're doing matchups. We know that when we're playing against some of these schools with our pitching staff that we have, that they hit a lot of ground balls, right? And maybe he's just a little better than you, ground balls, maybe not even on the flashy play, but just a routine play. Like the man just makes it. He just makes it every time, right? And that's kind of how I was. Like I made the flashy play, but was, again, routine wise, like there's other players that weren't as talented as I was or gifted as I was, like where I could maybe go make some insane play. But at the same time, like I would boot a routine ball, especially when I was younger in bigger situations and not knowing how to manage my emotions.
Right.
Right. And so I think that is another thing too, because I just put all this pressure on myself and those other things. Right. So I think that's also something to be mindful of, is that, again, like the team, you want the team to win. And at the end of the day, like, find a way to help the team win. And you can't be the player and the coach at the same time, or the player and the umpire at the same time. Like, your job is to be a player. You don't make the lineup. You don't have a say there, right? Like, you can go and like have a conversation with the coach and, ask him what you can do to improve or whatever, but that's the coach's lineup. It's not your lineup. Right. And also too, like, it's just like having the coach's kid on the team, right? Like, and you start going like, oh, he's in the lineup because he's the coach's kid. Well, guess what? You're the coach's kid in your own head. You're putting yourself in your own lineup because you think that you're this and that, and you might not be able to see yourself objectively enough to understand that, like, well, I would give me opportunities. It's like, yeah, I know you would, right? But it's just having that understanding, like, the coach is trying to win. He's putting the best, he's not trying to lose. He's putting the best team and the best lineup together to try to figure out what's the best lineup that's going to win against this matchup, right? And like, that might not be you. Something just important to keep in mind.
Yeah. And I think too, a lot of this, like how this ties back to like season coming around the corner, is like, there's a lot of ways to contribute.
Yep.
One, and then two, it's not always mechanically or my swing that is why I'm not in the lineup too, right? Sure. There's a lot that goes into, right, and it helps. And I think too, something I hear a lot of is like, immediately when someone struggles, they think something's wrong with my swing, and in my head I'm like, okay, I could probably point out a lot of things, like, for sure. Like, you might not be Mike Trout. You aren't Mike Trout, only Mike Trout. So like, yeah, for sure I could point some things out. But also like, I go back to like, one, what do you do well? What do you not do well? Did you do the stuff that you did well good today? Or did you try to do the stuff you weren't good at? So it's like, hey, what part of the zone do you hit well? I hit low pitches well. Okay, how many low pitches did you get today? 2, did you swing at them? No. What pitches did you swing at? Balls at the top of the zone. Why'd you do that? Whoa, I wasn't thinking about it. Okay, so you weren't intentional with your approach. I'm like, so let's start there, right? That's a little bit easier fix. Like, tomorrow when you get your ABs, like, let's go look for something below the belt, below the belly button, stuff like that. And I just think like there's a lot more that goes into that process, where like the off season is so, I'm in the lab. And then you get on the field and it gets big and the lights turn on. It's like, I forget everything. It's like,
well, yeah. And I also too, I want to make sure too that, like, obviously, as me and you do with context, they could get on the field and move absolutely dog shit. Like, they could be moving great in here, right? And then, like you said, right, all of a sudden the lights turn on, the anxiety comes on, all the stimulus is back that they did last season, and all of a sudden they go back to moving how they were. I mean, I've literally seen people completely change their stance. Like we did this with Chewy in the very, for like a while, right? He would be in here, be much more narrow. Yeah. Right. And then all of a sudden he'd get in game and be like wide, crazy wide. And he'd be like, I don't even know why. I don't feel like I'm that wide. It's like, you just don't notice it when you're back in like that environment and you get in the box and you have your spots that you put your feet, like, again, like all these things that you could run past. So we do always, of course, manage and look at video. We're not just like whatever about how they move, because, again, on some of that, right? And some of that can be changed with their approach, right? Like, again, like we're talking about is like, for example, one of our players said they had a scrimmage tomorrow, right? They just texted me. They're like, hey, like, I have a scrimmage tomorrow, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, hey, yeah, for you, I would think I would go with what we have been doing, even though we've been talking about like adjusting something and like maybe playing with a different move. But one of the move I would be changing is more of a timing mechanism. And, again, for example, like, she's really tall right now, but then if I was going to go to like a toe tap, right? It's like, okay, well, that's a different timing mechanism. And also I want to work on it with you. I don't want to just say, yeah, just go toe tap. All of a sudden it's just like telling someone like, oh, just start doing a leg kick or something. Like, it's a massive change. And like, I want to work on it with you and be with you while we work on it so we can talk about some key important things. So, and I even said that too. It's like, just because we go to a toe tap today doesn't mean that all of a sudden you're going to be doing it in a game tomorrow. Like, it might be a drill for you. Like, think of it more like a drill, and we're working on it in the cage, and then we might roll this out mid-season. You know what I'm saying? But for right now, we're going to go with either the Band-Aid or, again, the NASCAR we currently have. And then I went into like the approach stuff, right? Where it's like, okay, hey, but with this Band-Aid or this approach that we do have, for you, I want you to approach the top of the zone and react down. Because I know, again, I know how she moves. Like I know that it's going to be easier for her to approach this way. And again, I know what she struggles with, right? And then, I think that with that is like, again, contextually having that all together is like, and to your point too, is like, hey, like I guarantee you're not moving the greatest before you ever come in here. Like I already knew that before you left. But with that being said, no matter how you moved today, you could have gotten some hits, right? So there's a big difference there of, let's talk about being a hitter while we continue to work on your swing. Like, of course, we want to continue to work on your swing. And then also, too, sometimes getting past, again, I'm just giving shout outs to Dinkle here, is he used to talk about like opening week, opening day, all those other things. And one of the talks he would have with the team is he would talk about like, hey, the teams that win these days are the ones that can manage their emotions, right? The ones that can get back settled down. And I think you said something key earlier, which is like, hey, like this is the fun part. When I start to put all this pressure on these things, like it's opening day, like everybody wants to hit a bomb on opening day, go 4 for 4, post it on their IG. Like I get it. But like, along with it, it's like in reality, it's just like, let's go have some fun, right? Like somebody said that the other day when we were talking about like playing Sunday League. So yeah, shout out to that. We might, I'm saying some good content. We're getting ready. We'll see how that's going to go. But again, we might play in the Sunday League, right? And someone's like, but will you post your failures? And I was like, it's actually interesting that you say that because like one, I don't even believe I can fail. Like, what am I going to do? Like make some adjustments and like learn more about hitting and like, like there's not a way to fail.
It's like that cliche, like I've just learned 100 times how to not do it or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, it's not a failure to me, right? It's just, again, like I tried something and that one didn't work at that particular moment. But also too, like that same thing I tried might work in a different moment too.
Yeah. And also too, like also a different thing of being like, yo, like I was telling him, I was like, we're going to have fun. Yeah. Like we're going to have fun. Like bro, like my job is not to hit anymore. Like my job is to help other people hit. Like that's what I do. Like I help other people hit across the whole, I guess, world. You could put it that way, right? Like we're helping other people hit across the world, sending them products, doing other things to help them better, right? Across, again, Australia and Japan and here and like, again, like all these places that we end up, helping with where our content goes everywhere, right? I mean, there's people, this podcast specifically, like people listen to the Dominican Republic, they listen to this podcast. Like when I want to look to the countries of all the places that people have listened to this podcast, it's all over the world, like all these other places. And so that's something to think about too. It's like, again, like that help of understanding that like, yo, like if you, what would your season look like if you approached it that way? Right? Because that's really what it is. At the end of the day, like, this isn't a pass fail, bro. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is just feedback, right? The game's just feedback. Go have some fun, get some feedback from it, make adjustments, continue to get better tomorrow. When you start harboring it, it's like you make it like a job, like a pass fail, like either, again, like, and also too, let's be honest, hitting wise, like you're going to get out. I don't care. We're going to go play Sunday League. I guarantee you I'm striking out, bro. Okay. Who knows? I might get 3 the first day, bro. I'm a K guy. You know what I'm saying? Like your boy was getting big, right? So that's the thing is like, and that's the difference, right? Of like mentality of like, somebody also on social media comparatively, like to like, yo, hitting's hard, bro. Like, it don't matter I don't care if you're King Griffey Jr. Like it's you know what I'm saying? Like hitting is hard. Like King Griffey didn't go out there and bat 500. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? He didn't even bat 400. Yeah. So it's just one of those things to think about. It's just like, yo, hitting is really hard, no matter what level. Again, we can throw batting practice. We talked about this with the high schoolers. Bro, I go out there right now and throw batting practice to the guys. Like, again, half the team's going 0 for 4.
They're getting themselves out.
Yeah. That's why pitching is so much easier. It's like, bro, you could literally make a terrible pitch and the guy just gets himself out. It's difficult.
Yeah. I was thinking about that too when we were hitting this morning, bringing up the Sunday League. That's a day one of prep for the Sunday League. But I was thinking about that when I was hitting the machine balls versus the real balls, is like how minor the changes were from like location, but how consistent the machine balls were versus the baseballs.
Yeah, I know, it is like, cool to go back.
And I was like, dang, like it's a completely different mindset to that, right? Like
Yep.
I'm
Yeah,
hitting the
on the ball.
machine balls. I can allow myself almost in a way to like let my guard down and work on
You're focused
something,
on you.
right? But then the baseballs start coming, and subconsciously, right? I'm like 5 swings in, and everything just like flew out the window because I'm like, well, that one was a little up and in, that one's down and away, that one cut more,
Yeah.
you know, like
A lot of variables.
you know, right? And then like it's into it was so minor compared to what like a live arm even is, right?
Yep.
And you know, like again, then that goes into like, you know, managing the emotions and all that side of it too. But I just think about like,
and then you got fans there, the game's on the line, right?
Yeah.
Like your team's down 2, whatever. You've already struck out twice today. You're up there again. This guy's throwing 40 miles an hour. This is the other thing, bro. I don't know the league we're playing in, but one of the things it actually was really challenging. This is where people don't think about this. It's like when people go play in Japan, like, bro, these guys spin the hell out of it. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like when you go play in like Japan and places like that, like a lot of guys aren't beating you with velo. They've learned how to pitch. And then think about that, right? You know how we always say, like, oh, I could get you out with my body and, you know, like your body and my head. That's a 40-year-old, 35-year-old man up there with the body. He don't throw that hard. He might be throwing 82.
Yeah.
But, like, bro, he's spinning it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I've seen some guys, some curves. I've seen some curves in Sunday League that I'm like, yo, is that Kershaw's? Like, that thing has so much vertical and has so much spin. And then that's another thing. They've mastered, and this even in the MLB, just because it doesn't happen as much, because drastically everybody still has this, you know, this idea of faster is always really hard to hit. But yes, if you're just going linear, if I'm going to do the same speed all the time, but if all of a sudden I throw a ball at 95 and then I spin a 63 mile an hour curveball with crazy spin on it, like that speed differential is so dramatically insane for the hitter to try to cover those ranges of speed is really difficult. That's why when people like mix in an ephus, like why an ephus used to work back in the day, and even too, like I bet you again, like even now, right, when we see position players getting on the mound and they're throwing, like major league hitters are striking out, right, because it is hitting one is really hard, and you know, it is a lot of the pressure to make something happen is on the hitter. Like the hitter's got to hit the ball. Pitcher just got to get it somewhere in that zone. Like, you know, again, like even, and then when we do hit the ball, we got to hit it where there's not a defender, or we get it past a defender. Like, you know, it's again, you got 9 on 1, right? It's not stacked in your favor, bro. You know, and then we talked about this other day. It's just the concept of thinking about that. The concept of thinking about, I have a stick. You're going to throw this rock at me that could hit me, that would really hurt and could break bones and could kill me, right? When you throw it, when you're throwing it like these guys are throwing it, right? Not our Sunday league guys, but like speaking of that, bro, I don't even got a helmet. We gotta prepare, bro. We gotta get ready.
Any sponsors out there?
We gotta get ready. I gotta get my major league helmets back right. I gotta go out there with one flat, baby.
Flat.
Yeah, and so like just keeping that in mind, right? That like, yo, like, hitting is really difficult. And so at the end of the day, you know, again, like much more people can throw a ball than can hit a ball flying through the air. Like, and it's also the opposite skill than what we do in everyday life. In everyday life, you're trying to avoid a collision. When you're driving, you're trying to avoid a collision. When you are walking past people in the store, you got shopping cart, you got all these other things. When we're walking past a desk or something like that, we're trying to avoid collisions. That's the opposite. We're trying to align ourselves with collisions and trying to make those things happen, which again is a different thought process, like with your brain too, like as you shift in. Again, obviously different when you play baseball every day, but I'm just saying from like, again, what we do normally throughout our days. And then the other thing that we started talking about too, which I think is big, is like, okay, so you're going into season, and again, like what you're spending your time doing, like there's a time for maintenance, right? Yeah, like there is a time for surgery, and there's a time for, you know, again, just general vitamins, and there's also a time for also a time where it's like, yo, I got a little sick. It's gonna be like a 2-day sickness, right? And there's a time for all of those things. And so a good doctor should be able to recognize the difference, right? Like a good doctor would know, like, okay, these are just daily vitamins that you take every single day, right? This is what I would prescribe, right? Or I'd recommend. And then also too, then there's times where it's like, yeah, you are sick and I'm going to give you, I'm going to give you some medicine that's going to assist you with this. Right. And, but again, it's only like a 2-day sickness. And then there's times where it's like, dude, we need to have surgery. Right. And there's context to all of that. Usually like surgery, there's something catastrophic like happened. Like maybe there was an injury that you're working around. Like I've had guys do this, for example. There's kind of two different situations I think about when I need like surgery, right? Is obviously physical surgery or other thing. But one of those would be like, for example, like I've known some guys that have like torn their shoulder mid-season, but they're like a first baseman or something like that, and they're going to keep playing, right? And so they need to know how to work around that injury, right? So like we might have to change their stance, or we might have to do something that helps them. For example, like Tatis, when he like hurt his shoulder and, like he started going to like a really hard like stick finish there for like a minute, was because he couldn't one-hand finish because he would hurt his shoulder. So he was like having a two-hand finish, like everything he was doing, right? Like there's a time where there's going to be like a bigger change or something like that might happen. Another time might be like, like it's bad. Like we're deep enough and we got enough info, right? Like let's say it's like a pro guy, like you're going into like all-star break and you've been playing constantly or whatever, and it's like, I'm batting like freaking 220 right now, right? I'm batting like, and this is dramatically worse than what I've done in years past or doing whatever. And it's like, okay, like we got to make a bigger change. But I always, again, just thinking like a doctor, right? Like I'm not going to tell you like in those situations, because obviously it's not life or death. Like I'm not saving a life. This is that person's career. Is I'm going to them, and that's where the difference of context is I'm going to them and saying, hey, I would recommend this surgery at this time, but at the same time, it's got to be your choice, right? You can I'll work with you with what you're doing already, and we'll just make these you can take these medications and do these other things. But like, bro, like, I'm going to tell you what the writing is on the wall. Like you're probably just, if you keep moving like how you're moving right now, you're probably going to bat between, 220 and 235 or something like that, right? Yeah. If that was the case for those guys and their at bats and how consistent things are, right? Now, knowing the difference, because it can be really hard when we talk about lower levels, because like, we talk about high school or something like that, and then also you got to remember some of these guys are playing club ball, doing all these other things. They're seeing way higher velo, and then they go back to high school and they're like, that happens to softball a ton, right? Like softball, the club ball is way better than high school. Like, and again, baseball, it is definitely more, like SoCal, you might get some really competitive, obviously, like, the teams, and there's certain areas like that. But, specifically when you talk about like softball, like in general, like high school softball just like isn't great. But like, again, baseball, it can be dramatic, too, as well. As like these guys are playing on scout teams. Like that used to happen to Harper all the time. Is Harper, was notorious for having a bad start to his seasons in high school. And a big part of that was because he'd be playing scout ball and these guys are throwing, mid 90s at the time. And, they're throwing 93 to 95, all these other things. And then he's coming back and face us and going preseason. These guys are throwing 78, throwing 82. Right? Like, and he was just crazy early on everything. And he would like smoke balls to second basemen to start a season every year. Right. And so, he'd be hooking balls. People be on the field talking smack. Yeah, prodigy of baseball, blah, blah, blah. You look at his stats 3 weeks later, you'd be like, oh my God. And like, okay, maybe he is that guy. And so one of those things is like, again, is like within those adjustments. The reason I bring that up is like sometimes people think they need surgery because they went 0 for 15 to start the season. And it's like, bro, you were just crushing in scrimmages before we started the season, which is the same. You're seeing the same velo, seeing all the same stuff. Like most likely, like I even ask guys all the time with that. I was like, are you really that bad? Yeah. And I mean that by like in a good way, right? Like, okay, let's say you struck out 9 times in a row. Like, are you really that bad of a hitter that you're going to strike out 9 times in a row? Like Jarrell ain't striking out 9 times in a row. Whoa, you know what I'm saying? Whoa, so like, it's like, are you really that bad, or you think it's probably something mental going on and you're putting all this pressure on yourself and you're like, like you're not even doing the routine things that you can do because you're emotionally overwhelmed, right? You get in the box and you're having a panic attack, right? You get in the box, you're putting all this pressure on yourself. It's, I don't get a hit because you put me on the lineup. And then you start doing the circles, right? All this stuff is like, that's what's really holding back your performance. It's not that you're not that good, right? And that's what I had to deal with when I was playing, is I started doubting my capabilities of what I was actually capable of doing. And then I'm like, I like literally had to get some distance, and as I started maturing and getting older and just being like, and some of it was when I stopped playing, is just to go, dude, like you're better than how you actually played. But you again, like I used to have Taylor's grandfather used to tell me this all the time. Papa used to always tell me, be like, like you just need to get out of your own way. Like, like your mind is like your worst enemy. Right. And so a lot of people, of course, right. What a lot of like, stop thinking and all those other things. Like, no. Like I needed to learn how to make my, again, and everybody kept talking about my mind, but disconnecting it from my emotions. Right. It's not a logical issue. It's an emotional issue. That was a hard thing for me. It wasn't that I wasn't smart enough, right? Or those other things. Is that my brain was being weaponized because of my emotions. You get what I'm saying? And so I was getting emotionally overwhelmed, and I was having all these, like, the same thing too, right? It's like I'd put all this pressure on myself on opening day, and I'm, trying to do all these things. And I think that that's just a bigger thing for us to keep in mind, is that sometimes, and that's the wisdom of a coach, of understanding, like, someone wants a, like they talk about, like, surgeons. Like, let's say you're a surgeon. It's actually interesting. I thought about this from a lot of guys on the private side. And I definitely have fallen into this too as well, is like, when you're a surgeon, you always want to cut them open because that's what you know. And that's how you know how you can fix it. Right. Like, okay, well, yeah. Like, let's say, like some of these things, like, let's say someone's having a whole bunch of issues because of their weight. They're having like an ankle problem because of their weight or something like that. Well, like, the surgeon's like, well, I can cut you open and just remove this, 20 pounds of fat off of you. And it's like, yeah. But also too, that won't be lasting change, right? I'm not changing, which is the real problem, right? Like, I'm not changing. And then two, on top of that as well, like, again, now I'm causing a whole bunch of other issues. Like I'm going underneath a knife, like any, all these other things that could happen, or, whatever. And I think that's like, a bigger, thing for us to keep in mind, is like, as you become better at a doctor, is understanding, like you said, is like when to not say something, when to not perform surgery, when to not make changes, and also to reinsure the athlete so that they don't do that.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Because they also might want to start, and then helping them also too, not only like, they need to obviously trust what they're doing, and you can't just tell them like, oh, just go up there and be an athlete. Like, they know something's wrong. And like, if you're actually just more upfront with them, like, yeah, hey, this is the problem. This is what we're doing. We're going to work on fixing it. But in the meantime, this is how we're going to do it. And just real with them. Those conversations go way better, in my opinion. And the hitter actually has some confidence. And then they don't lose confidence in you.
Right.
Because you don't start going like, yeah, everything's good. And it's like, I'm still going 0 for every day.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And you keep telling me like all these things. And I'm like, bro, like, I feel myself yanking off every ball, and I can't stay on a slider to save my life. And they've thrown me. I've swung and missed at 9 straight sliders. Like there's, again, they've figured this out about me, and this is how they're pitching against me, And so some of those things to also keep in mind. And then there's also, like I said, let me give you an example the opposite way. I had somebody on an organization that said like, they would come to them, like the analytics department would come to like the hitting side and be like, hey, like we chased like 20% more, on that series, or, than normal. Like what was there such an influx? Like they had the top pitching staff in all of the, on all of the MLB. Like, did you not see who was on the mound?
Yeah.
Like, of course we swung and missed. So sometimes I bring that up because sometimes guys want to change all these things. And it's like, bro, the reason that you got exposed there was because they threw nothing but soft lefties at us, and you were terrible with soft lefties, right? Or all their guys have a sinker or something like that, right? Or majority of their guys did, and then the last come, just got in your own head or whatever, right? And so I think that's also a bigger thing as well, is like, again, bringing in the context and understanding, like, and again, you should know. And as a hitting coach, like, I can sit there and like see the matchup and like what shapes the guy's creating. And I'm like, oh, like, Johnny, little Garth Brooks is going to struggle with this guy, and this guy's going to be pretty good. Like, this is a guy, he's like, oh, like for me, like if I get up there and the guy threw a fastball and he thought he threw kind of hard, like you could throw, I don't care what speed you throw, you could throw 1,000,000 miles an hour. I can square up a fastball. You know what I'm saying? That the speed that wasn't a problem for me. the changing of speeds, the adjustability part when I was playing was the problem for me, right? It wasn't the velo, necessarily there, because again, it was just, and then like I said, it wasn't very hard to get me out though with velo, because all you had to do is like have a basic secondary pitch and it would mess me up, because then I'm worried about the secondary pitch, and then now I'm not hitting the ball that I can hit. You know what I'm saying? Rather than going like, all right, dead red fastball, like, I'm going to do something damage on this guy. So I think that's one thing is like, and then knowing that as a coach, but when you know that as a coach, then you can also help your players understand that.
Right.
Understand where they're at.
I think exactly what you were just saying too is like when to not change things up. Like I could look back, and I think a thought process that personally helped me with this was like when I was younger in my career, I was like, I have to go 1 for 3 to keep my 300 average pace.
Yeah,
but by the end of my career, I'm like, as long as I get 30 out of these next 100 at bats, as long as I get 30 hits, like batting 300, And then I even got bigger. I was like, well, if this is over the course of 4 seasons, because I got 4 years of eligibility, and I get 200 at bats, like I only need, X amount of hits. Like that's not that big of a deal. Like I could go 0 for my next 40 and still get 60 hits. Like shoot, like that's not that big of a deal. It's like I started looking more macro, because I was I started to understand like I would panic if I would go 0 for 3 and I would change something that really wasn't that big of it. Like I went 0 for 3, but also some of it was like, like you said earlier, we were on the road, it was cold, I X, Y, and Z, like my swing wasn't completely a mess, right? Like, I had a bad day for a multitude of reasons, and like, I didn't need an overhaul. I needed to keep doing what I was doing a little bit longer to see the breakthrough, right? Like you made this comment the other day, like the resistance is the heaviest before, you break through, or, you leap forward and finish that. And so, I think the same thing was like, I felt like a lot of times there was a lot of resistance, but realistically, I needed to do stuff just a little bit longer to get that skill or that move to stick, or that concept and that feel to stick well enough for me to take it to game, right?
For the perfect example of that, and I've told this story, but again, like, go back to like the Ryan Court days, right? I was like, for example, when I overhauled a pro guy, minor leaguer for like 10 years, struggling, all this stuff, made these changes, went to go play independent ball. His first 15 at bats or something like that, 20 at bats, like he had struck out like 12 times or something like that. But his pregame looked great. Like his cage work looked amazing. Like he was making some really good adjustments. And instead in that moment of going like, he's just like, I don't think it's clicking. And, he's all emotionally was again, like he's trying to make his way back in Major League Baseball, like all these other things. Right. And, my advice back to him at that time was like, hey, actually, dude, like, I think you just need to do it a little longer. Like like your pregame looks really good, right? And again, like it's going to take a little bit of time of just getting it into your normal swing, because we made these changes in the last couple of weeks. It was like surgery, like real late before you started going and like rolling this out. And I just think you just need to do it a little longer. And then then he went on a tear, did all the things, got called with bigs, all this stuff. But like still though, that's just like one of those stories. For example, it's like I very easily could have just went like in surgery mode, right? And be like, oh, we need to make these changes. But it's like, no, when I was watching him when I was watching what he was doing, I'm like, bro, like that's a pretty good move.
Good, yeah,
it's a pretty good move. So it's just something like again, with that is just like understanding, and then also helping the player understand like, hey, like go watch yourself hit, like go watch the swings that you were taking and those other things. And like, yes, you might be swinging at a bad ball, all those other things, but there's plenty of things you can look at in your move where you're like, hey, like, actually that was pretty good. I was just, again, like it might've just like, I especially, I could always feel the difference. I could always feel the difference when I was like really far off compared to like, I felt on that. I just missed.
Right.
And then that's where, and then I go look at video and confirming and being like, oh, okay. Like, again, like that was a pretty good swing. I just literally was underneath it. Or again, like I was a little early, or, whatever those things might be. And, just taking that in and just being like, or I just missed where I thought the ball was going to be. It wasn't.
Yeah.
Right. My brain's projecting where I think the ball is going to be. Maybe I just need to think a fastball above and I'd be fine. You know what I'm saying? And that's all I need to make the adjustment with. Right. So, kind of like a doctor in that way, right, is like, let's adjust some of the smaller things right before we go to like a major thing. And then like a lot of that is like feel as a as a hitting coach of understanding and knowing your athlete and knowing like, can they handle a bigger change, or like, is this, how big of a change is this for them? Or are we just referencing again back to something they used to do? And we're just, this could be a great little thing to go back to until we keep cleaning up this other pattern.
Yeah. Yeah. I think about that too. Like I'll tie it to basketball and like shooting. Is I had a coach one time tell me like, this is within context because I don't agree 100% all the time. It's like, if you can't feel it, like you're not that far off. Like when you really feel it, it's because you're so far. Like I feel my elbow way out. I feel like my feet were here. Like it's because it was really off. Like when it feels good and you're just barely missing, it's like, it's because you're not that far off. Right.
Yeah.
It's not, and two, I think some of that, like when it comes to hitting, like, there is an aspect of feel and proprioception and stuff. Like you could not feel it because you don't have some of these other things too. But, I think there is like an encouraging, emotional aspect to that. If like, well,
if you know yourself where you're like, when I feel like this, I know that my swing is like usually pretty close. And again, like match it up with video, right? Like
video.
I mean, even if you're feeling some type of, let's just go away from like body feels, like emotionally, right? You're like, you're angry or upset about something, or you're sad about something, whatever, right? And you're talking to one of your friends about it, right? And you're talking and you're going through it and you're unpacking it. And then you might realize that you're like, actually my life's like, okay. like I was getting kind of worked up. My perspective got kind of, out of skew, but like everything's okay. I just how my perception was off, right? And sometimes like that happens in the box, right? Like sometimes your just perception's off, right? Like you're sitting there going, I went over 4. I'm the terrible. All these other things, like, and then again, your friend, good hitting coach, all those other things are going to help you too as well. Be like, no, you're not. You're not that bad. You just went over 4 today, and like you hit a couple balls like on the screws. The guys caught them, right? Like, you expanded that one at bat and Cade, but like that was pretty good. Like you had a pretty good day. Like when it looks into like how you're moving and all that stuff, and it's also crazy to think about that you're judging yourself on most likely less than 4 swings.
Yeah.
You're judging yourself on a game with less than 4 swings that you probably took the whole game.
Yeah. I think about that from like
some of bats
perspective.
Yeah. Some of the bats you're going to get no swings. Some bats you're going to get a couple swings, but more than likely game to game, you're probably going to get somewhere between like 4 and 6 swings.
Yeah.
Like
it's a game of averages, right?
Yes.
And kind of like I just said, it's like, I think about it from a study perspective. Like, would they publish an article off 4 swings? No, right? Would you go under surgery because of 4 swings? Probably not. Maybe a really good surgeon that has done it for a long time and seen a lot of things.
And
like, okay, I see something that could be coming down.
And how intrusive is the
100%.
The surgery?
Right.
Is it something I can go in there with a little small thing and like really help you out, and it doesn't won't affect the body very much? Or is it something that has a 10% survival rate, and if I do this, you're gonna catastrophically die? And what is my skill level as a surgeon? And we started talking about this in the very beginning. You as a hitter, this is where I tell some hitters like, hey, wait for me before we do this. And then 2, the other thing is your skill as a hitting coach. If you're not a surgeon and you're a pediatrician and you don't have skills going into surgery, the death of that surgery is catastrophically more than what the average is across the board. Right? So you making these major changes in the body when you have you're not a very skilled surgeon. You're more of a pediatrician. You know how to give some general medicine and all these other things. Bro, play your game, do your thing. You're a hitting coach, and you're a hitting coach and you're a player. Adjust your eyes. Just think higher, right? Think 2 baseballs above. Think 2 baseballs below. Think in, out. Think right center field. Do the approach thing. Don't hate on surgeons because you need one. Right? When we need a surgeon, we want the surgeon, right? They save lives, all the things, right? There's a time for therapy. There's a time for therapy. There's a time for surgery. There's a time for pediatrician. There's a time for all of it. Right? There's a season for everything, right? Biblical. But, with that as well is just understanding that like as a hitter, more than likely, like even though you can feel what's going on, right? Because you can't watch. Imagine trying to like perform surgery on yourself and like not being able to see, right? And then you're like, okay, even if you did a video delay, even if you do like real time, some of those things, right? Like if I would much rather, and I think every barber in probably the whole world would be this, right? Like, yes, some barbers will cut their own hair. Majority of the barbers just find another really good barber and have them cut their hair, right? Because it's really difficult to do. You know what I'm saying? So especially if it's like designs and the more intricate you get with it and like all the other stuff, right? Like You know, and even Jarrell, the barber in the house, right? Like even him, I was talking about going and getting having a barber cut his hair, right? And so I think one of the things is, actually, since we're on that topic, I just want to bring something up real quick. I said this to somebody the other day because they brought up me talking about like seeing somebody in the middle of a haircut, and my response back to him, because this is the thing. So basically, the idea is, when we're in the middle of drills and sometimes we're posting things and we kind of in the middle of that surgery, we're posting like the middle of the surgery and you're like, what? Like that doesn't look how it's supposed to look, all these other things, blah, 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 blah. Right. But it's like looking at somebody in the middle of a haircut, right? Middle of a haircut. So think about this. When you're getting your haircut, I wonder if your barber does this too. Because majority of the barbers I've ever had, I've done this. They start cutting my hair, turn me away from the mirror. Right?
Yeah. Yeah,
because nobody wants to see themselves in the middle of a haircut, and we don't understand the process. So they're like, "Oh, I don't like, bro. What are you doing, bro?" It's like, bro, he hasn't faded you yet. Chill out. You know what I'm saying? Right? Like he gonna clean it back up. You know what I'm saying? And if he doesn't, we'll figure it out then. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like again, barbers turn you away from the mirror. You know, when they're cutting you, and like that's a big part of it. Is a lot of people, like I even know certain people that literally. I had a barber talk to me about it one time when I was out in Utah, where he was like, this guy will like, he's like one of his clients. He's like, he told me like straight out, I was like, I don't want to see myself in the middle, like no pictures, no video, no mirror, no nothing. Right. Like he just like is an insecurity like that he had. Right. Yeah. And so some of those things as well is like bringing that up is like, yo, sometimes again, on some of the things you see on social media, or also, and that's why I love the post-game footage too, is like we might be exaggerating the hell out of something in batting practice. They might be in here and we might be exaggerating something so huge, like huge, exaggerated, actually. Right?
Yeah.
And again, another perfect example of that is like we talked about before, is like with Chewy, right? It's like, again, he plays at Cal. And if you see him in the cage, like he has some exaggerated moves when we do certain things. Now the big rocks are happening, right? The big rocks are happening, but specifically when he comes in here, especially because we only have him for short periods of times half the time, is that we go really intricate, right? And we might like really drive something in, right? Something that, because we know that when he's on his own, it's not going to show up as dominant because of the other things that are happening, how he's lifting, how his lifestyle, all the other things that are coming. So like, let's over exaggerate this, right? And this isn't something new. We have, this like when we used to practice ground balls and we, dramatic, things that we used to do, like swing straight down, like with us, right? Like we're exaggerating, right? And so in any case, like bringing those together, bringing us all back home and landing the ship, right? Is that at the end of the day, there's a time and a season for everything. And then also as a coach, you got to do a good job of having some self-awareness. And this is the biggest thing. It's like, how do I do it? It's like, well, the first step is like, you need to develop your self-awareness, which is, we could do a whole podcast with that by itself, but you need to develop your own self-awareness to understand like what you are, because everybody's not a surgeon, right? And some of us are a therapist and we're not a pediatrician, right? And so understanding like if you're a hitting coach and your main thing is like you're more like a therapist than anything, okay, know your lane, player. You know what I'm saying? Like coach your thing up and then don't hate on other guys, right? You need the therapy too, like you need a therapist too, but also too, you got to know the difference between the two and like who I need and when. Because depending on the issue, if I go to therapy and in reality, like I need to replace my ACL, okay, maybe I need the therapy and the ACL surgery, right? You get what I'm saying? But my point is the same thing too. It's like, I need to know what I actually have. I need to know who I am. And yeah, again, therapy isn't going to just work for everybody that has a physical thing going on, especially if they have an injury or again, there's a physical structure hardware problem that we have to work on within the body, right? That is a different thing. Or also too, we're developing like, again, we're going the difference of, what's going on, like literally like in their body, like it could even be a CNS thing, right? Like a CNS thing, we're working on coordination, sequencing, like all these other things. That's like, that's not just the therapy thing. You get what I'm saying? But there is a time, and there's plenty of times where I played therapist, and then the best coaches, right? I think also like with doctors, right? The more holistic doctors are not the ones that just want to cut everybody open, but understanding can go one, outsource you out to somebody that is really good at that. Right. Or two, they do have that background in that and would be like, oh yeah, I would go with this. Yeah. Right?
Yeah. I know. I think too, just literally just going from my experience on getting surgery, right? Having two different doctors that I've had surgery under. It's like, I look at one and just how calming he was and was like, oh, we're going to have you in and out 30 minutes, no problem, yada, 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 this, that. And then the other one was like the complete opposite to me. And I was like, I could tell you which one I'd prefer, you know, when I'm about to go under, like I loved feeling comforted. And the other one was like, you know, like might work, might not work. It's pretty risky.
It also depends on the surgery too, right?
Yeah,
because
right.
the surgeon's got to be straight up
real.
with you.
Yeah,
surgeon's got to be straight up with you too, because you could be doing a really easy surgery that's like, yeah, you're gonna be in and out 20, 30 minutes.
Yeah,
and the other surgeon might be like, yo, I'm gonna be real with you. Like, this is tough surgery. I'm gonna do the best I can.
Yeah.
Again, I'm one of the best in the world that does this. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, we're gonna go after it. But yeah, that's also because we do that with hitters, right? Like, you know, again, for example, especially in short periods of time and what they're asking to do, it's like, look, I'm one of the best in the world at this, and I'm gonna do everything I can. And also too, I'll tap in other surgeons and other people if I need help. But at the end of the day, like, this is risky. Like, and I've done that, you know, I've done that with pro guys where I've told them like, hey, what we're about to do is really, do you understand what we're about to do? Yeah. Like, I need their consent, right? like I'm like, hey, we're about to perform, like, I'm not prescribing you some pills. Like, we're about to go underneath surgery. And if I change these major things in your swing, these are the bad results. These things could happen. Right. And then a lot of times when I'm having that conversation though, it's already that bad. And then they're going like, bro, it ain't getting, like, it's already bad.
Right.
That's why I'm here and ready to perform surgery. And I'm like, okay, as long as we're on the same page, we understand where we're at, like, let's rock.
Yeah, think about that too, just like from being around those situations. It's like, you know, I'm at this age, I've been in this for this many years. Like, I'm here because I need, like, I've tried taking pills for this long. Like, I actually need the surgery now. Like,
for sure.
I tried therapy. Like,
tried this.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Right?
This is why I came to here to you, because I already expected to do this. Yeah.
Right. And it's like, there's that, like you said, like that consent where it's like, you do understand what this is about to, you know, entail. Right. And then, you know, being understandable with that is like, you know, hey, season is about to start. Maybe we could wait for surgery in 3 months when your season's done. But for the time being, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, stabilize this. We're going to get stronger here. We're going to do X, you know, all of this to make it manageable and get through the season well enough. And then we're going to perform surgery after the season, right? Where it's like, you know, there's some stuff here that we can work with. It's good enough. You can go compete at this level. And then, like, to get to where you say you want to go at the next level, we're going to need to do some bigger moves. But you know, I think a lot of that too is just like, you know, perspective, context, understanding. But I think it's really important going into season is, I think a lot of times we lose perspective because we get emotional about season starting, and it's like,
because it means,
you know, one, you didn't do anything all off season, and then all of a sudden you want to go over an overhaul because you're 0 for 20. Like, okay, like that's bad too. But then there's also like, you know, you spend all this time, you know, working in the off season, and then you go 0 for 10. It's like, it's also not the end of the world, right? It's like, you did put in a lot of work, right? And, you know, hopefully working on a lot of the right stuff, right? Yeah. And so, you know, I just think it's a big time of year. You know, every level essentially to some capacity is ramping it up to that point. And then also to just understanding like where you're at in that journey. You know, did you spend a lot of time on your swing? Did you not? You know, is it too late? Is it early enough to do an overhaul? All that type of stuff. And I just think too, like I think the relationship and conversation side of things is really important going into this time of year, for a lot of them to understand, like, hey, this is what you're good at, this is what you're struggling with still, like, and it's okay. Or, you know, maybe this is a good year to, you know, take a gap year or a red shirt because, you know, X, Y, and Z happened, or you do need to perform surgery, like physically actually need it, or, you know, you're a freshman and like it's not that important that you play as a freshman in college, like maybe you can redshirt. And so I just think there's a lot of context that goes with that, and I know you've had a lot of experience with a lot of different levels going up, and like I'm learning too with some of that, having like 10-year-olds all the way up to, you know, some minor league guys. Like it's just super interesting, the different mindsets and the different times of year, and you know, managing that, if you will. So I just think it's a, you know, big time of year, and it's a fun topic. So but
Tank over there getting a deep snore.
He said we're not interesting enough.
That guy is over there straight snoring off the couch. His whole body's gone. And those neck rolls are hilarious.
Classic.
All right, let me pray us out and we'll wrap it up. Dear Heavenly Father, God, we're just so thankful that we get to enter into a new season, God. Let this season teach us things that we've never learned before, God. We just ask that you bless all the players around the world, and that you continue to just guide them and use this as a bridge to bring them closer to you, God, and that you just continue to help us surrender and lean into your will for our lives, God. And we just ask all of these things in Jesus' mighty name. Amen. Amen. That boy over there,
He's praying too.
He's snoring. He's talking to the Lord while he's sleeping. Well, until next time, Farm System out.